From Breaking and Blessing by the Reverend Sean Parker Dennison. Can you believe? Can you believe in a world where no one is turned away for being wrong? Can you believe in a world where mistakes are simply ways of learning? Can you believe in a place where you can feel the lightness of not knowing? Can you believe there is room enough at the table for you and for the one you call enemy? Can you believe in the improvisational nature of mystery and irrational compassion? Can you believe that training you to be a devil's advocate was a way of stealing your tenderness? Can you believe that you can get your tenderness back and become a chief collaborator with love? Let us now worship together. And welcome to the Unitarian Church of Baton Rouge, served by Reverend Nathan Ryan, Reverend Eric Poza, myself, Leslie Reynolds, as your ministerial intern. Our ministries would not thrive without the support and collaboration of Lee Hartman, our music director, Kathy Smith, Director of Religious Education, who'll be running chat today, and in the Tech Treehouse, we have Dave Como. And thank you for your participation in the flower ceremony. We know it's frustrating to do some of this in a virtual way, but I want to thank you personally for helping me make this special for you. We are glad you are here this morning from near and far, and we invite you to our website to find out more about the opportunities to practice our faith together, and you can also sign up for weekly bulletins to get all the fun stuff that's happening. Settle in, friends, and let's enjoy our annual tradition of the flower ceremony.
This is a part of the flower ceremony story you may not have heard before. It comes to us from the Reverend Barbara Child, who wrote, "Flower ceremony is a beloved tradition in most of our UU churches. Most of those churches have not let the pandemic keep them from celebrating. You may already know something about Norbert Chopek and his wife Maja, but I'm guessing there's more to the story that you don't know. Norbert came from this country, from Prague, as a widower with 9 children. This was at the time of World War I. He came to organize support for a free Czechoslovakia. He met Maja here, although she was also Czechoslovakian. They married, and they had a child of their own. That meant a family of 10 children, a total family of 12. Now, Norbert had been a Baptist minister, but he'd given that up, and he and Maja didn't go to any church. But they thought their children ought to have a religious education. So they sent them off every Sunday to a different church. And then the children were to come home and tell their parents what they had learned that day. Well, finally, one Sunday, the children went to a Unitarian church. This was in Orange, New Jersey. When they came home and told their parents about that church, Norbert and Maja decided it was interesting enough that they wanted to find out about it for themselves. They went to that church the next Sunday. They loved it, and eventually they went back to Czechoslovakia and founded a Unitarian church there. We are used to thinking, when we think of Eastern European Unitarianism, we think of the churches that were over 400 years old. But the Čapeks brought it to the new Czech Republic in the 1920s, and this was a time when Czech leaders knew it was not going to be easy to launch a democracy out of the many ethnic groups and traditions, but they were hopeful. Norbert Čapek, the Unitarian minister, who was, as we say, a come-outer from a previous faith, was the one who gave religious voice to the hope for pluralism to flourish in Eastern Europe. His church in Prague grew and grew. It became one of the largest Unitarian churches ever from that day to this. Some accounts say the congregation numbered as many as 5,000. And so an interesting part of this story is that it was children who introduced Unitarianism to the minister of the largest Unitarian church ever.
This congregation has a tradition of placing stones around our chalice. I invite you this morning to type the names into the chat, or you can place an asterisk, of the beloveds in your life that you would like to be held by this larger community, and I will place the stones for you. Please joining me in the chalice lighting words. With hope for a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love.
One love. We are one, a diverse group of proudly kindred spirits, here not by coincidence, but because we choose to journey together. We are active and proactive. We care deeply. We live our love as best we can. We are one, working, eating, laughing, playing, singing, storytelling, sharing and rejoicing, getting to know each other, taking risks, opening up, questioning, seeking, searching, trying to understand, struggling, making mistakes, paying attention, asking questions, listening, living our answers, learning to love our neighbors, learning to love ourselves, apologizing and forgiving with humility, being forgiven through grace, creating the beloved community together. We are one.
Here comes the important part about the flower ceremony. The Unitarianism that Norbert Chakopek preached in Prague was strongly influenced by the religious humanism he had learned in this country. At the same time, he wanted some symbolic ritual to bind the people in the congregation together and give expression to the life-affirming principles of Unitarianism. Most of the members of the congregation had rejected the Catholic Church of their upbringing. They wanted nothing to do with anything that would remind them of Mass or communion. The Chopeks developed the flower ceremony so that the service would not seem threatening to the former Catholics, but also so they wouldn't be just sterile intellectual lectures. He was trying to find a way for us to ritualize and embody our connection to each other. Maya told us his motivation for the flower ceremony was to highlight and uplift each of us who are a part of this religious community. The flowers are used as symbols of the gifts which each person can make to the church and through the church to each other. The exchange of the flowers means that I shall walk without reservation with anyone, regardless of social status or religious affiliation, as long as they are ready and willing to go along in search of truth and service. When you add your flower to the bouquet of flowers, you are adding yourself to this community. Your gifts, your laughter, your pain, your skills, your children, your parents, your grandparents, and even your ancestors. Each of us is important to the health and wealth of this congregation. Our beauty lies in our diversity. Please join me now in prayer. Spirit of life, love, and liberation, who binds us tightly together to do the work and play this congregation is called to do. We are reminded of how beautiful this community is, this congregation, this bouquet of love. We hold each other in the times that make us ache for relief. When the news from India is so heartbreaking, as we learn they are running out of wood to supply the mass cremations. COVID-19 claims more souls amidst the incapable government response there. And we hold each other just as tightly in those times where the joy and giddiness remind us of what lightness and levity feels like. But reaching out sometimes is hard. We have been conditioned to keep most of our pain and joy within us. Spirit of liberation, remind us that we are here for each other, to be guiding friends along your path to liberation. We can't do this on our own. We don't want to do it on our own. That is not our call. Our call to a world of peace and liberation requires us to need each other and to be there with all of our holiness when we hear that call. May the Spirit of light continue to shine the way to wholeness. Amen.
Take a look at this flower. Look at its wildness, its layers of beauty, its folds and patterns, shades of color and curly-Q designs. Look at the pollen, the rich feast for the bees and other pollinators we need so much. Look at the delicacy of the blossom. Look at this flower. There is more in it than I understand, and if we were to look even closer, we would see more and more of its beauty and wonder. No two of these flowers are exactly alike. Each one has its own beauty. Most days, most of us wouldn't pay that much attention to this flower. It's just a dandelion. We might even call it a weed, but it is lovely, and it is complex, and it is wonder-filled. We are like this flower sometimes. We don't feel worth very much sometimes, or maybe other people miss the wonder and complexity that lie inside of us. Maybe people don't look at us very carefully sometimes. They see only what they expect to see, not the unique individual inside. Maybe we feel unwanted sometimes. We might lose sight of our own loveliness. We think we're not pretty or special or important, or we just feel in the way. Sometimes we feel a lot like the dandelion. But look at this flower. Look at what you never knew and never noticed. We are like the dandelion. We are stunning, beautiful, complicated. We bring the richness of our color to the world. We give to others as the dandelion gives to the bee, just by being who we are. Yes, there are some days, and they are sweet days, when we feel like a rose or an orchid, prized by everyone, admired and treasured. We know how precious we are. But more often, I think, We are dandelions, every bit as lovely, every bit as important, every bit as wonder-filled, whether we or the rest of the world pay attention or not. So I ask you today, and every day, to treasure the dandelion inside you. Honor the beauty and uniqueness that the rest of the world doesn't always see. Take pride in yourself, love yourself, honor yourself, and give to others. Treasure the dandelion.
The beauty of our bouquet grows and grows as each of us bring our wholeness and some brokenness to each other, to be held in love and to be encouraged into even deeper growth. Our individual uniqueness is blessed and holy, and we are indeed worthy of dignity and respect. Our individuality is what makes each of us important to the healthy functioning of this church, this congregation, working and playing for peace and liberation in our complicated world. Individuality is great, but changing just the last two letters in the word individuality to the word individualism, and we have a different picture. Individualism is one of the characteristics of white supremacy culture that keeps us all from reaching our full potential. Not just people of color, all of us. In the U.S., we have a rich mythology of rugged individualism. Images of a sturdy young pioneer claiming his stake in the land and surviving. And that was part of the colonization and settlerism plan. The Louisiana Purchase in 1804 sent poor white people to settle the land. The gold rush in the 1840s sent white people out west to go and get rich. Go west, young man, westward ho. And the 1862 Homestead Act gives land to white homesteaders. If you could survive for 5 years on the land and improve the land, then you could own the land for free. 270 million acres of land given to 1.6 million homesteaders. Being a rugged individualist who could make it on the land, survive the elements, and sometimes those elements were the indigenous people who were caretakers of the land, trying to continue to live on the land in spiritual and sustaining ways. But that was the goal, to prove you were man enough to make it on your own. We still value that individualism. We have a lot of language for it. Lone rangers, soul traders, self-starters, self-made men, self-made women, going it alone, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. This was very much the language and mentality and work ethic that I was raised in, so it has been hard for me to move into something different. But I really value the work of people of color who have been able to lift up how this mentality harms the collective. Because if you can make it as an individualist, maybe you don't need the collective. Having prided myself in my initiative, my ability to be a self-starter, to be self-managed, to be independent, you can imagine my discomfort when I got involved in justice work in the movement for collective liberation, and I wanted to take on projects myself. I didn't need anybody else. They weren't having it. They knew and know how important it is that the work of liberation is done by the collective, by the community. And sure, some tasks are great to be given out to individuals to do, but the goal is understanding that our liberation is tied up together. We need each other to get through this, to make the world we know can be. And now, I working in collaboration models. It is so liberating not to think that I have to be the be-all, end-all, know everything, do everything perfectly, get it all done by myself. And I want to let you know what a joy it is to work with the staff at this congregation who have a theology of collaborative leadership. It's just really beautiful. I've also been around enough on some online meetings that y'all have had or some online events to see the model of shared leadership in this community. And it is indeed a beauty. Our UUA leaders and staff has shown us models of collective leadership too. We had 3 co-presidents in 2018, all ministers of color. We had the tri-moderators, the tri-mods of the Unitarian Universalist Association for a long time there. And they were trans people and people of color. And that was when I saw how beautiful it looked. That the image of the white individualistic leader lost its appeal for me. I still struggle because undoing internalized messaging is hard. Sometimes I am so tired, I just want to do the thing by myself. It's easier that way, I can just get it done. Collaborating is wonderful, but it takes more time to learn how to work together in a collaborative model. And we have to take the time to learn how to trust each other and to recognize the gifts that we each bring into the collective and how to use those gifts. Sometimes just doing the darn thing is the right thing to do. I just recognize when I'm doing it and I ask myself if doing it by myself is harming the collective, if my individualism might be showing. If I'm tired, I need to pay attention to my responses that say, just do the thing. Maybe I need to rest first. Maybe not. But I need to pay attention to when and why I am reverting to the individualism model. I want to make sure that my individuality, me as a beautiful flower, is part of the collective, the wondrous bouquet where our collective liberation shines brightly.
Right.
The ritual ceremony created by Reverend Chopik lifts up our individual beauty that is joined into the collective, the flower into the bouquet. Usually Norbert alone gets credit for the flowers ceremony, but it was Maya who brought it to this country. She came in 1940 to raise money for the Prague Church, and she introduced the ceremony to the first parish Unitarian in Cambridge, Massachusetts. But things did not go as the Chopiks planned. World War II broke out, and Maya could not get back to Prague. She had been ordained back in the 1920s, so she stayed here and served in assistant ministerial positions in Massachusetts. The war raged on. Norbert was now 70 years old. He organized a resistance committee that met in his church, and they helped Czechs escape the Gestapo. Then came the fateful day, March 23rd of 1941, when Reverend Chopik went into his pulpit for what would be the last time. He had reason to believe that there were members of the Nazi occupying forces sitting in the pews, and also a number of Jews whom he was hiding from the Nazis. He had already been questioned by the Nazis. His friends and families had warned him he was in danger. His answer? All people who are worth anything are either jailed or examined by the Gestapo. I would be ashamed of myself if I were not. So on March 23rd, he issued a direct challenge from the pulpit to the occupiers. Truth and crude strength are incompatible. And then he went on to refute point by point a recent speech of Hitler's. It was the last sermon he ever preached. 5 days later, the Gestapo arrested him. After 4 months of imprisonment, he was tried and incredibly found innocent. He was told he might be freed if he begged the Gestapo for pardon. You may know enough about him now to be able to guess his response. He said, "I shall never bow down before them. It is them who should be asking my pardon." And so he went to Dachau concentration camp. When Norbert Chopik was taken away, Maya was still in this country, and she didn't learn with certainty of his death for 3 whole years. She decided then to make this country her permanent home, and she died in California in 1966 after years of valuable service through the International Association of Religious Freedom and the United Nations. Dear friends, the courage of Chopik and his community are echoed here in this community, and now we continue our spiritual practice of generous donation to the work and life of this congregation, rooted in love and liberation. This is the fertilizer, the water, the pruning that keeps this congregational bouquet shining in glory. We receive your gifts with the deepest of gratitude. The next part of the ritual is bringing a flower from the collective bouquet home to remind you of the beloved in our congregation in this community. So let our service this morning be in honor of the Chapics and all their successors who have held fast to principles of religious freedom, freedom from persecution, and the gifts of lives in human service. I like to think that the flowers we bring and take at these commemorations are the Chopek's flowers. They have survived the brutality of Dachau. They have survived the shadows cast by wars over the intervening years. And now they bloom in our land, across the sea. They reach across the decades and the continent to remind us of Norbert and Maya and the Czech Unitarians. They help us pay tribute to all who have suffered and died for a humane world. They are us. Our uniqueness, our beauty, our individuality, our commitment to each other and to this congregation, to our faith, and to our collective liberation. Amen. Blessed be, and Ashe.
starry heavens, worlds of all splendor, suns without number, new life engender. Wheel in a wheel with the light brightly glowing, moving in harmony, God's vision growing. Handful of pebbles, high mountain passes, depths of the ocean, dew on the grasses. Great things and small, with the light gently glowing, with the endless song, God's vision growing. Delicate gleams, lacewing and sparrow, in field and forest, clover and yarrow. Life greeting life with the light brightly glowing. None are too small to be God's vision growing.
From Spilling the Light, from the Reverend Teresa Soto, to the people who have mistaken freedom for liberation. To be free, you must embrace the breadth of your own existence without apology, even if they try to take it from you. You must know not that you can do whatever you want. You are not a kudzu vine eating entire hillsides for the purpose of feeding your lush life. You must know instead that inside you are entire universes, milky blue, magenta, and gold, expanding. But to actually be free, you must know and you must fight, for the entire universe is inside of everyone else. Being free is not a license, but a promise. With that promise in our hearts, friends, go now in peace and liberation.